Welcome to the 20th episode of Byte-Sized JavaScript. In the last few episodes, namely episode number 12, 13, 15, and 16, I covered the initial stages of the design and development process of Byte-Sized.tv, which is the public website of Byte-Sized JavaScript. Now the thing is, to discuss about the code of the website further, I'll have to cover some React basics since Byte-Sized.tv as of now is a React application. So we'll do a hands-on introduction to React. And although React is more like a Vue library, when you combine it with other tools like Redux or Immutable.js and things like that, it more or less turns into a framework, so to speak. And when it comes to learning frameworks, it's generally a common practice to start with something simple like a to-do list application, and I'll follow this trend as well, but with a twist. In this episode and in the next episode, we'll be creating a Trello-like user interface that will have different columns and different cards, and we'll be moving cards from one column to the other. And instead of storing everything locally, I want to make things more real-life-like, so we'll be using a real database. We'll be using Firebase as a NoSQL data store to store our data in the backend. You can learn more about Firebase when you visit this page. So let's begin. Firstly, we'll need a repository to host our project, so I'll pick Jedi Focus as a name because I want our application to give its user a Jedi-like focus so that she can get things done with great speed and accuracy. At least that's the idea. After creating the repository, I'll clone it in my local development environment. And before I continue, I have a side note. Until this point in time, in these episodes, I was using a cloud development environment, c9.io, and now I changed my strategy to use an actual desktop IDE. And the main reason I had chosen cloud was that it gave me a peace of mind, so to speak. Let me clarify it a bit. So for example, if my hard drive crashes or if I lose my computer, my project will still be alive in the cloud, so I can continue developing it by logging into my cloud IDE from my friend's computer, for instance. Moreover, I could edit my project anywhere that I can find a modern browser. So even if I install my operating system from scratch, I would not need to download an IDE and configure it or set up my development environment because my development environment would have been already set up in the cloud waiting for me to just start working on it. The problem with the cloud approach, however, was the fact that it was still foggy, so to speak. Let me extend a bit. Any desktop IDE, as of now, is still much reliable, much faster, and much stable than the best cloud IDE that you can find around. The only advantage of cloud for me was the peace of mind, as I said, it gave me, since I'd never lose my data because it will always be in the cloud. However, I figured out a solution for my data synchronization and redundancy problem by scheduling synchronization tasks of my projects folder to first a network attached storage and also to an external portable drive that is also connected to my computer, and I also linked the portable drive to Dropbox. So in summary, I have 3 backups of the same data that I take snapshots daily in Dropbox, in a network attached storage, and also in an external hard drive. So the odds are I will never lose my precious work ever again. I patiently experienced developing on a cloud environment for more than a year, and what I can say is, although we are getting closer day by day, we are still not there yet. Anyway, let's continue with our project. Since I am in a desktop environment, I decided to go to the dark side and try Visual Studio Code. And boy, I am not afraid to admit that Microsoft has done a great deal of job with this editor. To me, it's one of the best IDEs that you can find around to develop JavaScript and related technologies. The reason why is Visual Studio Code has established a nice balance between minimalism and functionality. I mean, it's more powerful than a simple editor like, I don't know, say Sublime. However, the user experience it provides is not as noisy as a full-blown IDE like, say, WebStorm. This is the exact sweet spot that I need, and some of you guys might also need as well. So let's open our project in Visual Studio Code and begin coding. Since this will be a web application, we first need an entry page, so I'll create public/index.html. Nothing fancy for now, I'll just put something that displays hello world so that we can test our web page, and I'll also initialize a yarn project by doing yarn init and answer a few questions to create my package.json. Next, I'll add a basic HTTP server to test the page that we just created by doing yarn add at http-server-dev, where --dev indicates that http-server is a module that we use only for development purposes and we won't be using it for production. So when we start HTTP server with the node modules /bin/HTTP server, we can browse to localhost 8080 and we can see our page. So far so good. Now we'll introduce our first React components. I'll create an src/containers/app/app-container/index.js and another file in src/components/app/index.js. I'll call the file under components as app component and the other one under containers as the app container. So I'll go inside my app component and create a function that returns our first hello world HTML. And to use this HTML like JSX syntax, we need to import React, and so we'll do that. And to render the component, we'll need to import React DOM, and we'll do that as well. I'll also add React and React DOM to my Yarn dependencies. And before I continue further, I just want to share you another project, which is Create React App. Create React App is React team's recommended way to start a React project, as it sets up an opinionated React boilerplate application that you can start working right away, instead of trying to figure out which dependencies to install, which files to configure, which can become a bit cumbersome, especially if you want to get your hands dirty with React right away. However, I believe, for the sake of this episode at least, installing the dependencies explicitly as we need them is much more helpful to learn how everything ties together in a React world. What I would suggest is to first try React without Create React App, and only once you are comfortable with the basics of it, then try to use Create React App. Because while learning a new concept, the less magic you see, the better things will make sense to you. Back to our code. I'll add two more files, an index file, index.js, and a template file, index.ejs, which will be our HTML template. So I'll return hello world in our app, and add a simple HTML that has a div with ID React-root in our index.ejs file. So the name React-root is totally arbitrary, you can pick any ID you want, but calling it React-root gives the person who reads your code the context. Like, this is a root level node where all the components of the React application will be bound to. And of course, I'll need to export this application component so that I can use it. And in our app container, we'll do nothing but export our app component initially as well. Although at this point, this kind of a segregation is an overkill, it will make more sense as we continue to develop our application further. The reason I do this is that I want to separate my concerns. Like, I want to separate the presentational part of my application and the logic part of my application from each other as far as I can. And this approach has many names. Some people call it using dumb components versus smart components, and some other people call it like using presentational components versus container components. And you can learn more about presentational versus container component usage in Dan's excellent article. So in the end of the day, our app container will have the business logic in it, and our app component will be a dumb component that just knows how to render an HTML template and nothing else. In our index.js file, we'll import our app component and render it inside this React root div. And for that, I'll also have to import a bunch of other required libraries as well. And since we have not included this Dombili library as a dependency, we'll add that one as a dependency too by doing yarn add Dombili. And Dombili is just a modern lightweight DOM utility that I created out of a need. You can just consider it as a DOM query selection helper utility for the sake of this episode. To put our application component into this EJS file and eventually convert it to an index.html under this public folder, we'll also have to bundle it. And to bundle it, there are a bunch of different bundler solutions, but the React community generally aligns with webpack, so we'll use webpack in our project as well. And to use webpack, we need to create a webpack configuration, and it is this webpack.config.js. And in our webpack.config.js, we'll require a bunch of plugins first. And then we'll say that we'll take this index.js and all of its dependencies as a source, and then bundle it and put the bundled folder into public JS bundles directory as the destination. So I'll also use React Dev Server because it provides quite a few useful features for React-specific projects, like the watch mode or hot module reloading. So when you change a file, for instance, React Dev Server detects that you have changed a file, and it runs webpack in the background to generate the bundle files again, and then it refreshes the browser. So React Dev Server, as its name implies, is for development purposes. In production, you'll need something more robust like Nginx or HA proxy or any other server that can serve static web pages. Now I'll define a few rules. First, I want to specify which modules that Babel needs to transpile, and then with extract text plugin, I want to extract the contents of the CSS files that I import inside my JavaScript and bundle and save them to an external CSS file under public/css/bundles. And with HTML webpack plugin, we'll inject these JavaScript and CSS dependencies into our HTML file by first reading this EJS template, replacing the template variables that we have defined, and then injecting the style and script tags that webpack bundles for us. And eventually we'll save the outcome to public/index.html. And we'll stop right here. To sum up, in this episode you have learned how you can create a really basic React.js application, and in the meantime we also discussed container components, presentational components, and how they differ from each other. We also configured Webpack to bundle our static assets and deploy them under our public folder. In the next episode, we'll continue from where we left off and finish our Webpack configuration, bundle and render our first React component, and then step by step gradually continue and convert this Hello World sample dummy application into an actual web application that people can use. And until then, may the source be with you.